questions are related, and Catherine, you get the first part to start.
Okay.
Are you in favor of or opposed to the institution of casino gambling in Massachusetts, and what's the reason for your position?
I would say I am neither opposed or in favor. I am very open to the idea. And the reason that I am open to the idea is because I do think that casino gambling in Massachusetts is inevitable. Once the Mashpee tribe got their federal recognition, they are going to be able to open casinos. And I think we can learn a lot from what other states have experienced, like Florida and Arizona, where they refused to really acknowledge that, and the tribes went ahead, they built large slot casinos, and the state was left out of those revenue streams. So I would like to be very open-minded about looking at casinos, make sure the state gets a share of the revenues, but I really want to focus on how does that impact our local communities, Melrose and Wakefield, and our local aid, and making sure that we fund the social services and the increases in public safety that we're going to need to go forward with that, and also that local communities have the right to vote on whether that is the right choice for them.
Thank you. Mark, are you in favor of or opposed to casino gambling in Massachusetts?
Well, initially, I would say that I am in favor. I'm not a gambler. I confess to buying a scratch ticket every now and then, but I have not made any trips down to Connecticut aside from one for a convention. So I do think that the state needs to look for new streams of income. And I think that this may be a solution for that. But we need to make sure that if we do that, we need to make sure that the income stream that comes out of those comes back to the communities like Melrose and Wakefield. So I would say that I would be in favor of it, but I would be in favor of it with reservations that we need to have the monies that come from those come back into the communities like Melrose and Wakefield.
Thank you, and you can start with the second half of that question. In the event casino gambling is approved in Massachusetts, what initiatives would you support to alleviate any negative impact associated with casino gambling?
Repeat the question.
Okay. In the event casino
Correct.
gambling
Yep.
in Massachusetts is approved, what initiatives would you support to alleviate any negative impact associated with casino gambling?
Well, what we need to do is we need to learn from other mistakes. And I also think that if we are going to go forward with casino gambling in Massachusetts, we need to do it proactively. And if we do it proactively and we create a convention center or a high class like some of the ones that are down in Connecticut, I think if we take a proactive approach to it and learn from other mistakes, then we may not have to address the problems and the negativities that go with it.
Thank you, Catherine.
I think that if we move forward with creating destination casinos in Massachusetts, we really need to make sure that we get these mitigation efforts right. I think we need to look at funding compulsive gambling services. That is going to increase, and we need to be looking at that proactively. We need to look at public safety. Whenever you draw large amounts of people to one place, and other states have experienced an increase in theft, in drunk driving, in all sorts of alcohol-driven, and just whenever you get a large group of people together, those sort of crimes are going to go up. We need to figure out how we're going to fund that. We also need to carefully look at what is the oversight structure going to be in the state? How is it going to work? Who are going to be the independent watchdogs for this? It's a very important thing. There are good models out there and studies being done of what's worked and what hasn't worked, and we need to pick the very best if we're going to bring that here to Massachusetts.
Thank you. Catherine, do you have any ideas on how to invigorate the state economy? Or federal also. State for now.
Well, I think with the state economy, as I said earlier, I think the key is long-term stable investment in our local communities. That is what drives businesses to invest in Massachusetts, to expand in Massachusetts, and to really attract the jobs that we need. I also think that we need to look at alternative energy and fuel and green technologies and really bringing that to Massachusetts. We're poised to be a leader in that, and we need to have that happen. I also think, that the casinos play a part in the revenues, but one thing that we tend to do in Massachusetts is overestimate some of our projected revenues from gambling, from some other sources, and we need to be very careful as we move forward in that. But I think that really looking at our local communities, where we live, where we spend our dollars, that's the place we need to make our priority.
Thank you. Mark?
Well, we have a state that's unbalanced legislatively, and I think we need to work on balancing that. What I think we need to realize is when budget projections come out, we hear about deficits, but we also need to understand that if you look deep into that, the revenues for this year are actually up 600 to 800 million. And we have a governor and a legislator that has introduced new spending ideas. So we are overspending our income. And I think what we need to do is we need to prioritize what we're spending on and maybe take care of some of the spending that we have, which would certainly help balance the budget that we have right now.
Thank you, Mark. Our next questions revolve around spending on education. Mark, would you change the funding formula for charter schools? And if so, how? Or if not, why not?
Well, charter schools are public schools, which I think is a misconception to some people. And right now there's a 1,700 odd waiting list for children to get into the charter schools. So I'm not so sure that expanding charter schools is a good idea. I mean, I believe it is a good idea. I also think that competition is always good, whether it's in business or in education. So I think the idea of expanding the charter school program is a good idea.
I'm going to redirect you.
Go ahead.
This is about changing the funding formula.
Okay.
For how the charter schools are funded.
Okay. Well, I wouldn't, at this point in time, I wouldn't change the way it's funded. The way local aid comes in to the communities right now is unbalanced, so I think it's more of the bigger picture than it is just specifically for the charter schools. So I would certainly look into ways to improve it, but if you want a direct answer to the question, as it stands right now, I wouldn't change the way it is funded.
Thank you. Catherine, would you change the funding formula for charter schools?
I would like to change the funding formula for all public schools. I think that it is a priority. Certainly in Massachusetts, we have been the state that has cut the most in public education in response to the last recession, and we're the last state almost to come out of that as we're on the brink of going into a new recession. Our funding for public education and higher ed is 47th in the country, which puts us below Mississippi. I think the problem with the charter school funding as it exists right now, it is very difficult to understand that formula. And when you break it down onto paper, what happens is people look at the numbers, they see 26% of our state funding for education coming in, following 5% of our charter school families. But it is a very complicated formula. There are ways that the school building assistance program applies to charter schools that it doesn't apply to traditional charter schools. I think what we have to do is fully fund education no matter what the people's choice are, and stop dividing our communities and stop pitting parent against parent when everybody has the same goal, which is a top-notch public education for their child.